Welcome to Entrepreneur State of Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Dale Caldwell, and we have William Franklin, the Executive Director of Equitunity, a young man I'm getting to know who's becoming a big part of our Entrepreneur Zone project, which we'll get to a little later. William, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. This is a great opportunity.
Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate all that you're doing for the community in New York City, and Brooklyn, and Brownsville. But first, I was like, where did you grow up, and where did you go to school, and how did you become so passionate about this work to transform the local community?
Okay, so I did grow up in Brownsville, which is in Brooklyn, New York. Mm-hmm. I'm fourth out of 5 generations that's in Brownsville.
Wow.
So that's where I grew up there. So as far as education is concerned, like I'm public school educated. So first education, second education, elementary, junior high school, all in New York City. Mm-hmm. I went to my local schools, my local district schools for elementary and junior high school. I went out of my neighborhood to experience something different. Mm-hmm. First time being exposed to different cultures, because as diverse as New York is, it's still potentially segregated. Yeah. And then after that, I tried my hand at college. My home life really didn't fit for that. Like it really wasn't. It wasn't a stable environment. So that was John Jay College. Mm-hmm. Back in the late 1990s, mm-hmm. and I dropped out and went to the Navy. And I was a vet. Just one tour I did, and then I was a ship serviceman, so I got to experience retail from a social perspective, because you can't keep any of the money, right? You have to figure out how to enhance the welfare of the sailors. So I got experience in doing that, and then once I got out, I did some other things. I was a coordinator for Stock Building Supply, which is one of the biggest building companies before the 2008 housing market crash. Right. And then I was a promoter for a little while, and I used that as an opportunity to build community and figure out what community policing was like, as far as advancing people forward through economics. And then I came back to New York, and I did some community work in my neighborhood. I got permission from the National Credit Administration to put the first credit union in Brownsville.
Oh, really?
But it was really hard without intellectual capital to force the cooperation and engagement amongst political leaders and such. So I decided that I was going to put a pause on community work and go get the intellectual resources that I didn't have. And the first thing that I did was go to BMCC. Okay. And I started out as a business administration major, and realized really quickly that I wanted to be an economics major. So in 2 years, I got my undergraduate between BMCC and Brooklyn College. Okay. And I wanted to see if I really learned what I thought I learned in comparison to my experience, to be truly educated. So the first thing that I did was go work at Macy's, and see if I could create revenue really quickly. And I did that, and figured out that I did learn something. I was excited about that.
And what did you do at Macy's? What was your role? What was your role at Macy's?
And Capital One gave me the opportunity to help individuals build an economic profile and expand from there. And in that moment, I realized what I wanted to do with the community work that I had put a pause on, and Equitunity was born.
So William, so before, so now what did you do, again, because we have people of all ages watching, so I always like those stories because I want people to hear that nobody goes a straight line. So when you were at Macy's, what did you do at Macy's?
Okay, at Macy's, I was a sales manager in the kids department. So one of the things that I was able to do was develop and train other people to become managers, so to speak.
Good.
So I was given a group of individuals who were basically locked in to a particular career path, and I was given the opportunity to develop them out of the space that they were in, so that they could actually get other opportunities in advancement. And at the same time, I was responsible for making money because it treated like it was my business. Right. So I literally had the the whole 4th floor in the store that I was in. And the store that I was in was an anchor store for the community downtown, and which is central Brooklyn, all the way out to the eastern side of Brooklyn. So what I did was make money and develop people to make money.
Wow, that's great. See, those are the life lessons that are so important in what you're doing, and people don't often value that. They just look at the more prestigious things, but those are the things that you learn. And so Equitunity, what prompted you to found Equitunity, and what is Equitunity?
Okay, so Equitunity is a public charity, a 501c3 that I founded and organized for the sole purpose of combating poverty in the bottom 12 communities in New York City. The flashpoint of Equitunity is Brownsville, Brooklyn, right? My community, which is the poorest community in Brooklyn, but the sixth poorest community in New York City. So the reason why I founded Equitunity is because I was born in poverty. I was the fourth at the time, before I had children, I was the fourth, the last generation, and it was 3 generations before me who was in Brownsville, and each one of us had the same exact circumstance. So when I was old enough to understand what that actually meant, it scared me, because I knew once I understood what it was to be born in poverty, to be passed down to me, I knew without a shadow of a doubt I was going to pass it down to my child if I didn't do something about it. I'm the first person in my family to get a bachelor's degree. I'll be hooded this year. I'm the first person in my family to go to graduate school. I'm the first person in my family to do more than just accept a city job and work it out for 30 years in order to get a decent pension. And I want different. I don't only want different for me and my children, I want different for all of the people that I grew up around. Because 2 things that we were guaranteed. We were guaranteed poverty and we was guaranteed jail. And I don't want either one of those things. And I don't want that for the people around me. I don't want that for the people underneath me. So that's what prompted me to launch Equitunity. But the reason why Equitunity is more than just my community, the reason why it's the bottom 12 communities, is because if you change the statistics in a place like New York City, if you change it in one community and you don't change it in other communities, all you do is shift it from that one community to another community. So the goal is to actually get rid of it so it doesn't exist anywhere and you can move anywhere you want throughout the city without having those indicators plague you. And that's the model of Equitunity. Not necessarily that it does it, but it can replicate itself in another space and support that replication in order to help bring down poverty. And it's all about, job creation. So how many people could you train up, to create their own job and then expand so that they can share that job with someone else and everybody make a family sustaining wage, which means that you're eradicating poverty as you move a person, from employment elsewhere to gainful employment and social initiatives. And that's what Equitunity is really all about. It's a composite word of the word equity and opportunity, which means every time someone in Equitunity engage someone, the whole purpose is equitable opportunities, which is a matter of justice and economics together.
Absolutely, just very, very well said. And I'm just so impressed with you and with that organization and what you're doing. So Brownsville, and if you look it up on Wikipedia, it says is the murder capital of New York City. It's dealing with all sorts of challenges, and frankly, one of the things that really bothers me is a lot of people have given up hope that we can make serious inroads into poverty. You and I don't believe that. We believe that we can we can do that. Why do you you grew up in it, you dealt with it, you see it everywhere. Why do you believe that we can actually do something about poverty? What gives you hope?
Okay, so the number one thing, right? Mathematics is, the language of life, right? So it doesn't matter what form of life you engage or where it's at in the, the galaxy or the universe. Math is the only language that everybody can communicate with, right? So if you're talking from man to God, you can speak in math. If you're talking from man to alien, you can speak in math. If you're talking from, animal to animal, nature to human beings, that whole conversation is about math. So I said all of that to say what gives me hope, right? Mathematically, poverty could be eradicated before the weekend comes in, right? So, to explain what I mean by that is New York City has a total wealth of, $2.66 trillion, according to the New York Times last year. And if you divide that by how many people are in New York City, which New York Times says is about 8.8 million, which is a little bit more than what the census says, but they're actually, adding up how many people have moved in to the city as a result of COVID. So when you put those two numbers together, the per capita wealth is a little over $300,000
per person.
So that's wealth, right? So that's property, that's what your business is worth, all of those things. So if that's not enough to convince a person that poverty is controllable, if you look at how much money is made on an annual basis in New York, is $1.07 trillion on an annual basis every single year. And if you divide that per capita and you follow the math, that it's a little over $100,000 per person.
Right.
But annual income is based on who works, right? So children and elderly people are not working, right? Children are being taken care of, and elderly people extract in the form of transfer payments. So if you take that portion out, and let's say that portion is about 40%, then that means the 60% who are working actually could take home a bigger annual salary than the little over 100,000 that we just talked about. And in New York, on average, if it costs about if you make $65,000 a year, you could live decent, which is well over the poverty line, whether New York says what the poverty line is or whether the federal government says the poverty line. $65,000 is well above that. So if the per capita income in the city is double what it takes for you to live comfortably in the city, then that means we can get rid of poverty like tomorrow. So what's the issue there? The issue is, who's accumulating that income or who's holding on to that wealth and whether or not it's distributable or redistributable. And when you look at social entrepreneurship, not just entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is great because it's solving problems, but social entrepreneurship solve specific problems like educational attainment, unemployment, crime, access to healthcare. So social entrepreneurship is a little bit different, and it's specific for people who are in poverty. So if you look at social entrepreneurship and how much money per community is available through social initiatives, it's about $500 million per community, and New York is made up of 59 communities. So the math gives me hope. All you have to do is do the work so that you can attach yourself to the equation, and your people in poverty or your people who are unemployed or your children who are in poverty, they actually could extract some value, not by creating anything, but by being involved in the process.
Absolutely, and very, very well said. And as you and I have talked about, I use the MIT living wage calculator, which says what a household of different sizes needs to make. And so the household that's $65,000 is the number. And so, but of the 8 million, about 4.5 million make less than that. And so in New York City, making less than $65,000. And so much of it is, because, this is my obsession too, is addressing poverty. And as we often say, you don't have to care about poor people, but when poor people make money and have jobs, rich people become richer. So society benefits, everybody benefits, and you and I know that. And so one of the reasons we're both excited about entrepreneurship is that that's a sustainable way of creating wealth and jobs in the community. And so let me ask you, why hasn't there been more of a support for entrepreneurs of all backgrounds and races in New York City, which is an entrepreneurial city?
It's for me, it's about the mindset, right? Not about the mindset of the individual.
Hey William, let me stop before you get going, because we're going to take a quick commercial break. But I want you to, when we come back, because I know you have a great answer to that. Let's pick up that topic. So again, we have a commercial break. Enjoy the commercials, and we'll see you back in a few minutes. Guess what it is? It's Mount Laurel, New Jersey. It's RBN Television, and you know that it's time for Moist Coffee.
We love our new home. Lots of windows, great light.
But the birds. They're back.
Yes, I hear them.
Uh-oh. Why are these birds so angry?
At least Geico makes bundling our home and car insurance easy.
We save a lot.
I'm going. Ah!
Hurry, hurry!
I know.
For bundling made easy, go to geico.com.
Welcome. I'm Barry Lefkowitz. I'm your host on New Perspectives on RVN TV. I come to you each week with issues and topics that you will generally find in the news. And if you're looking to be able to get caught up and know what's going on, then New Perspectives is the show for you on RVN TV. Look forward to having you.
Welcome back to Entrepreneur State of Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Dale Caldwell, and we're with William Franklin in New York City with Equitunity. And I just asked him the question that entrepreneurship, as we talked about, and he and I both know, is the key to really turning around poverty and creating jobs and dealing with crime and dealing with so many things. It's just so obvious to so many people. And so I'm asking William, why is it that government in New York City is not doing more to support and sustain and really making that the #1 priority? So what do you think, William?
The question to that is primarily, the answer to that question is primarily mindset. And you know, you have the general consensus believes that, you know, poor people are poor because they choose to be, right? They're not doing enough. They don't work hard. You know, they're lazy. It's easy for them to, you know, just extract public welfare, whatever the case might be. But the truth of the matter is that mindset is not just about the individual that's in poverty. It's also about the individual that can support the person out of poverty. You know, whether it be a policymaker or an investor. And if we can challenge the general mindset that's accepted, you know, amongst the people who could, you know, do something resource-wise about it, and also, you know, encourage and give all of the mental health tools to the person who's actually in poverty, you know, and you know, double in that, you challenge that on both ends, we could actually make headway as far as support is concerned. It's easier for, you know, a politician to give money towards a government program when you have basically an administrator, because, you know, a police officer, a teacher, a firefighter, they're technically administrators when you're talking about civilians, right? They manage a public good for the sake, you know, of the public. It's easy to give money to them and ask them to expand, you know, what they're doing than it is to give money to a person who's historically poor. So take me for an example. I'm 4th generation Brownsville. Born into poverty, 4th of you know 5 generations born into poverty. It's easy to look at me and be like, you know, I don't want to grow. But then it's few and far between when you have a person that actually does something for themselves, lifts themselves up out of their bootstraps, and then instead of going back to help someone else do the same thing, they just keep moving forward because the work is too hard. And I call that a challenge in preparedness, right? So let's be honest, right? There's a lot of money, programs, and resources in New York City, you know, in, you know, poor communities to help move, you know, communities out of poverty. But the problem is that they're big box programs. So when they get introduced, only the people who are immediately prepared get to take advantage of it. And the people who are not in the community who are immediately prepared actually would, you know, import in to the community to take advantage of the opportunity. So the people who actually need it are being looked over frequently and consistently as these programs start to evolve or new programs actually come in. So if there was an organization that goes and get that person who's unprepared and prepare them for the opportunity, by the time another one roll around, they would have already created enough for themselves to sustain, so that they can then take advantage of the more when the new program comes. And that's what Equitunity is really about. Equitunity isn't just about social entrepreneurship. It's about getting the person who's at the bottom tier of the bottom community and preparing them to take advantage of opportunities, whether they create it themselves and give it to someone else, or whether they wait around for a city program or a federal program to come in for them to take advantage of. Because as long as we keep ignoring those people, we're always going to have poverty, more than what's considered structural, more than what's considered normal. We're going to always have that. And the truth of the matter is that, you know, in Brownsville, poverty statistics is, you know, almost 30%, when New York City's poverty statistics is about 17%, 17.9%. So that tells you that, it's possible to create parity to where 17.9% is everywhere.
Right.
But the reason why it's not, the reason why some communities is underneath that number or at that number is because of what I said earlier. Like, you can uplift a community, all it's going to do is go to another community. But if you deal with the person who's at the bottom with no resources, and not just money resources, but intellectual resources, healthcare resources, childcare
emotional resources,
to take advantage of opportunities.
Right.
You can challenge their mindset in the process. You can challenge the person who can give resources mindset in the process, and then the government would have a reason to invest.
Well, and emotional resources as well. And so, but part of the deal too is, I don't even accept the numbers that government. I'm saying 50%. And so if you really look at the 65, that's 17, that 30%, literally 50% of New York City, the households do not make enough to pay their bills. And
that's true.
And I really, I think, and so part of what we're working on together is, so as you know, and the audience, I've mentioned to the audience before, we've created this concept called entrepreneur zones. I wrote about this idea of entrepreneur zones because of the opportunity zones that was in the previous administration's legislation. Can work sometimes, but it is so often is helping developers get tax breaks so that they push out entrepreneurs out and build these beautiful hotels. And so it looks like there's improvement, but there really is no improvement. Instead of really investing in the entrepreneurs in the community, working with organizations like Equitunity, in local communities. And so we're working in Brownsville on we're talking about 3 entrepreneur zones, right? Right, William?
Right. So Brownsville is actually prepared to do 12.
Wow.
Entrepreneur zones.
Wow.
But right now we're talking about 3.
Okay.
All being hubbed out of Socio-economic Development Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
The director there is, LaShawn Allen Muhammad, really, really great person as far as incubation is concerned, to make sure that actually spreads like wildfire.
Yes.
But the moment there's growth in one zone, then the appropriate thing to do is to break it up, mm-hmm. to make sure that, you don't lose sight of what the mission is.
Right.
And that's the reason why I'm saying, to move from, 3 spots to actually 12 spots, because
yes.
that's what it would take to move the community forward with the same mission based on what you brought to us, right? Mm-hmm. Based on what, you're building for the whole nation. So in the entrepreneur zone, just like the opportunity zone should be based on tax incentives, tax breaks. Mm-hmm. And I honestly believe there should be a matching program in there as well, because mm-hmm. a matching program for the tax incentives or the tax breaks would actually suggest and insinuate that big box corporations give for the sole purpose of being able to take off more than they actually give.
Exactly.
Because, we need something, but the big box corporation, in order to move forward, needs something as well. And like you said, they say rising tides lift all boats, but mm-hmm. if you go to the lowest portion of the tide and you lift there,
right.
all of the big box corporations that's way out in the higher tide, they go up even further. Well, so I completely agree that when we take all of that into consideration,
right.
it's necessary. The E-zone is necessary as a policy tool to bring in resources, to move the entrepreneurs that's not being heard for.
Exactly. But the other thing that you've called attention to, New York City, there's so much revenue that goes to these local bodegas, local businesses, local chains of businesses, and very few of them right. are owned by people that live in the community. And right. so literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars are going to these businesses and then leaving the city. So by really right. supporting local homegrown businesses, that stays in the community. So talk a little bit about that.
All right, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a huge component in trying to move poor communities in New
right.
York City
right.
out of poverty toward parity, which
yep.
is the 17.9%. If they're experiencing 30% poverty, like the bottom 12 communities in New York City.
Right.
So what happens is that you have maybe about $1.5 billion on average in a poor community
right.
that's being spent on an annual basis by the people in the community.
Well, but wait, let me stop you there. Wait, these are poor people. Poor people, William, let me stop the question. Poor people don't realize that $1 billion is being spent in these communities that people have written off.
Right.
That's why
right.
these businesses are there. See, that's an important point. That's a very important point. People understand the revenue that's in those communities.
Right. which proves that social entrepreneurship is lucrative.
Right.
That education is lucrative. That policy suggestion and civic engagement and community engagement is lucrative.
Right.
It proves that. If $1.5 billion is being spent in the poorest community in Brooklyn, that means it's lucrative to be a part of that community, the entrepreneur community.
Right.
So the $1.5 billion. I'm glad you paused me. So let's back up. The $1.5 billion is being accumulated by businesses in the community, with the business owners who don't live in the community.
Right.
So these people live someplace else. So every time they get a dollar, they take it to where they live at first, because their landlord gets paid.
Right.
And then after their landlord gets paid, they pay the school that their children go to, because their children is getting a better education. And then the school that their children don't go to, the public school that's in the community, their taxes actually prop those schools up. So when people say, like, how could a place like New York City, how could one community next door to another community have a better school system, and they're literally right next door?
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with property tax and the PTA donations and engagements that you get to actually bring resources into the school. So that $1.5 billion does that, right? That's the first thing that it does, but it exists.
Right.
It's money being spent by people in the community and given to people who don't live in the community.
Yes.
But then when you look at it, those people who came into the community to extract resources, to make a living, so to speak, they can't provide everything that the community want, because they don't even get the necessary resources that they need to expand in that community because of the community.
Right.
So a third of the money goes to a whole nother community that can provide, the things that the community want.
Right.
So the community is spending $1.5 billion, but only $1 billion of it is being spent in the community with the people who don't live there. And then they literally leave the community to spend another $500 million. So that's what I mean when I say, like, if you can just engage the person who's most unprepared to be a part of the entrepreneur community, they don't have to create anything. All they have to do is provide the goods and services that the community already want, so the community don't spend the $500 million out of the community. They'll spend it with a person in the community,
Well, see, and that's, they talk about how much money stays in certain ethnic communities. In the Asian community, it's several months, and others in the Black community, it's been, I've heard, hours, not weeks or days. But as we do the entrepreneur zones, that's one of the stats, is to see how much that money stays in the community. How long does it stay in the entrepreneur zone community? And that's a really important stack. So William, we're, as I said, these things go real quick, so we're at the end of time. What's your web address? If people want to get some information about Equitunity and what you're doing, what's your web address?
Say that again for me.
What's your website address? Your web address. Your web address.
Oh, it's equitunity.org. So
equitunity.org.
equitunity.org.
Excellent. Hey, William, thank you so much.
We're always fundraising.
Yep.
I'm a professor at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, teaching community cooperative economics to the poorest students in New York City, showing them how to be social entrepreneurs.
Wonderful.
And then building out their projects so that they can launch in their community to create jobs.
Wonderful.
So, and we're always fundraising because that takes money.
It takes money. So, but William, thank you so much. This is incredibly informative. I want to thank all of you watching Entrepreneur State of Mind, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.